I just wanna ride my bike, yeah. I'm just sick of always watching the news. I just wanna go outside, yeah. Spend a weekend way up top with a view.
Hey, what is up, everybody? You're listening to another episode of The Rim Break, where the goal of the podcast is to press the brakes on life a little bit and appreciate some of the businesses around us. I'm your host, Albert, and I am on my bicycle right now. Today, we are learning about Gary Fisher. So an interesting little thing about this company was that it is a company name and named after the person named Gary Fisher. So the company Gary Fisher does not currently operate, and they did have they did get bought up by another company, and then Trek bought them, or bought the Gary Fisher name. It's a lot of just absorbing of companies, pretty similar to like the beer podcast that we had a couple weeks ago. But yeah, so as of today, I'm still not sure if the Gary Fisher collection is even alive today, so I searched on the Trek website. And there's nothing on the collection, because Trek bought up the Gary Fisher name and created a collection in 2010, and yeah, there's nothing to be found. But I just sent Trek a message asking more information about the Gary Fisher collection, so hopefully on the next episode we'll have some more information on that. So just a little bit about the company and what they did. So Gary Fisher is both a person and a company, and it's very intertwined, and I'll try to be as clear as possible throughout. So Gary Fisher, the person, Gary Fisher is considered the godfather of mountain biking. He was a very successful road cyclist in his early days. He was also unable to compete for about 4 years because he didn't want to follow the grooming standards for road cycling at the time. So in short, his hair was too long, so they banned him. And in this time, he took a very punk rock approach to things rather than conforming to societal norms. He created his own path, like literally. So mountain biking at this time was in the mid 70s, was still a foreign concept, still at its infancy, and this is where Gary Fisher comes in. The person, he was one of the founding fathers of mountain biking. He was part of the mountain biking group called the Lake Spur Canyon Gang, which was named due to their location, Lake Spur, California, by Marin, a little bit north of San Francisco. So the Lake Spur Canyon Gang would purchase these old beater bikes for super cheap, walk up a mountain, and just ride down the hill. So they didn't have any specialized equipment meant for the terrain, just some friends having fun. And this leads us to the opportunity niche that Gary Fisher and his friends and business partner Charlie Kelly came to fill in. And this is a emphasis on the products. So the products or service that they were trying to sell were, in the early 1970s, Gary and the rest of the Lake Spur Canyon Gang spent most of their time walking up the mountain, so about 80%, and riding only about 20%. So this is a pretty good example of the Pareto's Law, also known as the 80-20 rule. And the origins of the Pareto's Law was 80% of Italian land was owned by 20% of the people, and it works for a lot of other things as well. 80-20 is pretty popular, and I applied that here, or it was applied here. So yeah, Fisher and Kelly saw this, and they just kept experimenting with different designs and prototypes. First, they would use these paperboy Schwinn bicycles, and they started modding the bikes, adding a 10-speed, some good brakes, some thumb shifters, some motorcycle brake levers, some drum brakes, etc. This is just this modding and prototyping process. It just made made it easier to get uphill, and eventually flip-flopped their problem so they could ride 80% of the time and only walk 20%, which is a good thing. That's more fun. The inventions seem to be a win, and more people gain interest. Still, their bikes were not specifically made for the terrain, and in the early names, they named these modded bikes as Klunkers, Ballooners, and Beaters. So there's this riding group called the California. Thus, the riding group was called the California Klunkers. After making some of these clunker bikes, they started organizing some races. An early race was Mount Tamalpais in 1976. The bikes were also called Repack because the bikes couldn't take any more beating, and you would have to eventually just pack it up and go home. With a hobby like this, you have to keep testing and building, and that's exactly what happened. The prototypes are incredibly important, and the most important one was made by Charlie Kelly and Joe Breezer. They set out to make a sturdier bike by adding twin laterals to make this the frame sturdier. The Breezer number 2 was the prototype that set up the mountain biking revolution. So let's jump into the name of the business. So in September of 1979, Gary Fisher and roommate Charlie Kelly formed a company called Mountain Bikes, and this was the original name of the company. It made sense because you were just going up a mountain and biking down it. But the name was too generic of a company, and a few legal complications later, they had to change the name and thus chose Gary Fisher. I find it pretty interesting that the name that they chose stuck so well in the industry today. Like, that's pretty crazy. They created a brand, and then now the industry is named after it. So yeah, pretty interesting. So they invented the mountain bike, but also created an industry and revolution, and not many people can say that. Some pretty unique finds was just some cool stuff that I found. Was the early stages in mountain biking was that it was pretty successful over a short period of time. The start of mountain bikes, the brand, was in 1979, and it grew incredibly fast, selling about 160 bikes the first year, and then 1,000 the second year. And these bikes were pretty pricey at the time, costing around $1,320 or $1,320 and up. So they had limitations due to their small size as a company. They didn't have, everything was done at a smaller scale, more expensive to do things, and all that stuff. And to tend to these limitations and grow, Gary Fisher decided to sell his company to Taiwan's Anlin Company, but he got to stay as the president. And then on June 16th, 2010, I think it's almost the exact day, it's the 15th today, yeah. So 9 years later, almost today, or tomorrow, they partnered / acquired with Trek Bikes. So Trek bought out the Gary Fisher, and thus Gary Fisher doesn't exist, but they still use the Gary Fisher name in the collection. So yeah, Gary Fisher doesn't produce bikes anymore, and they just have a Trek, or they're part of Trek, and they have a collection within Trek. But today, in 2019, there's no more collection that I can see. And this sounds pretty similar to that beer industry in the Lagunitas episode. You can learn more about that in the Lagunitas episode. I think it was 17 and a half. This is where big companies take up all the smaller companies, and there's only a few truly smaller independent companies left. Thus, but the reason for selling out to a larger company might be motivated for money, but others just want to scale up and see their products enjoyed by more people. So yeah, it just depends on why they're selling it. Also, some interesting bits where that Gary Fisher was roommates with the band The Grateful Dead. So if you're interested in music, check out Grateful Dead. Fisher was born in Oakland, California on November 5th, 1950 in a Navy hospital. Manufactured these bikes, mountain bikes were manufactured in Japan, so they got a hold of the Japanese supply chain. Mountain bikes was started with only $600, and the rest is history. And nowadays, biking, or mountain biking specifically, is huge, and it's a really great way to get outdoors. Some of the bikes that they have today are super high tech, with like the carbon frames and full suspension, the disc brakes, super fancy stuff, but super expensive as well. And even the biking events are insanely popular. One biking event that stood out to me was Sea Otter. There's lots of racing and just lots of stuff to do out there. And Sea Otter is in Monterey, California. So yeah, Gary Fisher, pretty cool person, pretty cool company. And I do plan on, hopefully, if he's free, hopefully we can get him on the show, do a quick little interview. That'll be really fun. So yeah, let's see what else I got on here. We got was headquartered in California. Proper and full name was Gary Fisher, and they had to change it to Gary Fisher because mountain bikes they just couldn't have it. Lots of legal stuff. Founded in California by Gary Fisher and Charlie Kelly. Was a family-owned business. Not really sure of the size of the company, but because it's pretty limited to find all of the resources online. But yeah, I think it was pretty small to medium operation. The key product was the mountain bike, and something unique. They definitely established a culture of having fun and not really taking the businessy stuff too serious. So yeah, pretty cool. You can have fun and run a business at the same time. So thanks for listening to the podcast. The podcast is a little late this week, but that's just what happens when life hits you with some more stuff, you know. So, and I'll just give the savage shout out to all the trail builders out there, those who make the trails real fun for the riders, and they keep it pretty safe. It's a pretty important job, outdoors, and yeah. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast, and have a nice day. Keep in touch with all of the social media pages, Facebook and YouTube at Bike Buddy, Twitter @bud_bike, and feel free to give me a suggestion next time at abernalis@bikebuddy.com. I'll see you on the next episode.